Portfolio Manager at Makwe Fund Managers, Mphahlele, joins us now for a broader picture of the latest market developments. A good evening to you. Where do we stand at the close on the JSE?
Afternoon. We were looking at the JSE. It was a bleeding day for us, but likely on the global markets, sentiment was largely muted at the fact that the back of coming from an AI rally coming from last week. But right now, investors are just generally doing a wait-and-see approach to wait for new economic data we're seeing coming this week, whether you look at PMI or inflation data. And investors are generally also questioning whether AI is going to be sustainable at a time where central bankers want to keep interest rates higher. Let's not forget to add some of the bet that might come with China reinflating in its economy and coming back into the pictures as investors decide to stop shorting it, as they're seeing signs of the fact that their stimulus is working when you look at the likes of copper and oil prices hitting bigger highs.
Having touched on, pardon me for interjecting there, Phaswane, I got a little bit intrigued when we're talking about inflation developments that are expected. Of course, that's what global investors are looking ahead to for this week and how markets are reacting. From the side of the US, Japan and Europe, what exactly is expected on the global scale with regards to those numbers being mixed themselves, but also serving towards a case that rate cuts are not to be expected anytime soon?
Well, put it this way. The general consensus is that the long-term inflation trend is on the downside. We expect inflation to continue to go down. But when we look at the bigger picture of how these is therefore interpreted by the market currently, we're looking at the influential bond markets that are indicating that despite the fact that there is coming down, but it's not going to be a straight clear road to go down. We're going to have some bumps, and that's why we are seeing some of the short-term bond yields, which is an indicator of talking to inflation and talking to interest rates, is that they're going higher and higher, reflecting the idea that interest rates will remain higher for longer, and this is the fact that we're seeing pricing out of interest rate cuts to take place, and the number of cuts are coming down, and this is one of the things that contributed to today's weakness.
Let's also talk about how emerging market currencies are performing along with the rand.
Looking at the emerging market currencies, the dollar itself, it's actually the first time going into this week that we're seeing it making its first losses for the year. And this is now given some breathing space for some of our emerging market currencies. You can look at the Brazil real. It showed some trend now looking at within its local economy, that its economic activities are resilient, giving it some strength. It's the same for the Indian rupee. It continues to show some strength, sitting around about 82.8 per dollar. That is last seen about 4 months ago. So it is good as they enjoy the inflows. They continue to enjoy the backup of the central bank remaining hawkish at this point in time. When we're seeing the Russian ruble there, it remains relatively steady. It awaits to see what are those sanctions all about that are coming from the US before it gives itself direction. China, it remains relatively stable, awaiting for those big PMI numbers coming in through. Investors are trying to make sense of those efforts to loosen up policy. Are they becoming very positive for economic growth? But however, from the back of there were slight weaknesses coming back from the house prices, reflecting some lower weaknesses, showing that the property sector is still a challenge for them. And when we bring it home here with the rand, it's sitting at 1933. It has lost around about 2.3%, coming up back from last week. And this, I think, investors are pushing them flow out of the market, especially because of the fact that following that budget speech, they were not necessarily sure what the government has put forward. Will it be a successful project implementation of it? And investors are also worried about the pushback of interest rates, and that has implications on our commodity prices, and our currency relies on those prices going higher, and that's why we're seeing the rand sitting at these levels of 1933.
Lastly, do tell us about the performance of commodities. Oil has lost some ground, gold edging away from 2-week highs.
Looking at those two specifically, we're looking at both of them. They sit on a bullish trend, so that is a good thing. But looking at the oil prices, yes, it has come down. It seems to have come down around 2%. And this was the back of the fact that from last week and going into this week, it was the back that demand uncertainty was outweighing the supply, especially when you think of the fact that if there's strong inflation is still there, and economic data in economies such as US is still there, interest rates are being pushed back, and therefore interest interest rates will be longer for higher, they continue to affect consumer spending, and that's why the demand part is seen as being questioned and outweighing the supply. But we're seeing today, starting today, the oil prices are rebounded by 1%, and that is going back to the story I was mentioning regarding the indicative things that China is probably going to reinflate. The data we're going to come out is going to tell us that China is trying to make its return to the global scale, and it has some implications on inflation.
Phaswane,
looking at the gold price.
Yeah, looking at the gold price there in those developments.
I got so expensive. Yes, so looking at the gold price there, it remains largely neutral. It still remains above 2,000 level, and that is a positive because it's still supported by what's going on in the Middle East. But the fact that we've seen the interest rate cuts back, we're seeing today continues to see some slight declines. It was sitting around the $2,028 an ounce.
That's safe haven status, always fluctuating. I must thank you for your time and patience. That's Phaswane Mphahlele, Portfolio Manager at Makwe Fund Managers. And that's how we wrap it up in business news at this hour, taking a closer look at the market boards.